Well, that's that Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome to the briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. That Conservative leadership race is genuinely underway. What should Conservative MPs be looking for? We'll speak to Alberto Costa. The Labour leader, Keir Starmer, has been setting out his stall too this morning. We'll bring you the latest on that. And the Prime Minister has just given an interview. We'll bring you that too. All of that after the news with Rosie.
A very good afternoon. It's 12 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. Now, Boris Johnson says he's determined to deliver the mandate he was elected on in 2019 in his final few weeks as Prime Minister. It's his first public appearance since he resigned as leader of the Conservative Party. There are now 11 candidates in the running to replace him. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has become the latest senior cabinet minister to add her name to the list. Well, speaking in the last half hour, the Prime Minister said throwing his weight behind one of the candidates could damage their chances.
The job of the Prime Minister at this stage is to let the party decide, let them get on with it, and to continue delivering on the projects that we were elected to deliver. And and what I will say is that whoever is picked, I have no doubt will want to continue to support brilliant places like the cricket.
The Conservative MP Robert Jenrick told GB News he's backing the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak.
Personally, I think it's best to focus on what that individual can really offer the country. And as I say, I think Rishi is the person of the greatest ability. He's an incredible hard worker. He's someone who has achieved enormous things already for the country. Front and centre will be the economy. And so choose the most economically literate person and the person that the public trust the most to deliver for them.
A timetable for the leadership contest is expected to be drawn up this week once the new 1922 executive has been voted in. The group of backbenchers will then finalise the rules of the leadership contest. They're meeting today to discuss changes that could limit the number of candidates who can run. They're also looking at the rules governing a no-confidence vote. A no-confidence vote is something the Labour Party is pushing for in order to attempt to immediately remove Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. So Keir Starmer's announced Labour will focus on the next election on growing the economy. In a speech this morning in Newcastle, he said Britain's dealing with a crumbling economy and deserves better. He also accused the Tories of behaving as if they've just arrived from the moon. The Labour leader hit out at what he called the hypocrisy of those who served in the Prime Minister's government, saying they supported tax hikes despite being opposed to them all along.
Britain deserves better than this. We need a fresh start. We're not going to get that from a Conservative Party infected with the chaos virus caught from Boris Johnson. This is what I will do for Britain. And I will do it with a plan to tackle the three biggest issues that we face: rebooting our economy and ending the cost of living crisis, revitalising our public services and re-energising our communities, and uniting the country and cleaning up politics.
In international news now, Japan's ruling party swept to victory in national elections today following the assassination of its former leader, Shinzo Abe. He was shot during a campaign speech last week. Police say the suspected gunman used a homemade weapon and as a grudge against a group he believed Abe had ties to. The former Prime Minister's funeral will be held tomorrow afternoon. Heathrow Airport is warning passengers that it could cut more flights this summer. Tens of thousands of people have already been affected by flight delays and cancellations over the past few months. Heathrow's apologised for the disruption as it tries to recover from losing thousands of jobs during COVID lockdowns. Scientists have designed a new contraceptive to help limit the number of grey squirrels in the UK. The government says the method will be field tested soon. The plan involves trapping the squirrels in feeding boxes and then spiking their food with birth control pills. The project's goal is to help protect ecosystems and native red squirrel populations. Today could be the hottest of the year so far in Britain. The Met Office has issued a heat health alert for parts of the UK as temperatures are expected to hit 33 degrees this week. The alerts will stay in place until Friday. People are being asked to check on those vulnerable to extreme heat. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the briefing with Gloria.
Coming up this hour on The Briefing, 11 Conservative MPs have put themselves forward to be our next Prime Minister. Our political editor will tell us what happens next, and the Conservative MP, Alberto Costa, will tell us what he's looking for in the next Conservative leader. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has set out the party's plans to grow the economy. I'll discuss this with Labour MP Emma Hardy, who will also tell us about the horrendous waits that women are facing for gynaecological treatment. My latest Real Me interview is with Conservative MP for Gloucester, Richard Graham. He tells me how he nearly died in a Chinese desert, how he believes politics is in a better place than when he came to Parliament, and his campaign against spiking in nightclubs. And we're also discussing kinship care with the Liberal Democrat MP, Munira Wilson. And as always, we want to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on who should be the Conservative leader. Email me gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at GBNews. And the Conservative Party leadership race is on. 11 candidates have thrown their hat into the ring. And now we are going to Anna Riley, because an unpaid carer in North Yorkshire is petitioning for more financial assistance for the over 600,000 families dealing with dementia at home. Derek Brown has gained the backing of his local MP, Rishi Sunak, to push for a council tax discount for all carers. Anna Riley has the story.
Come on, just drink this.
Derek Brown looks after his wife Margaret, who's lived with dementia since 2018. And after a 3-year campaign, he secured a petition in Parliament. It intends to help others with loved ones with dementia to secure council tax discounts as soon as they're diagnosed. It's something that could give a one-off benefit of hundreds up to thousands of pounds.
I'm fighting for 600,000 people in the UK who've got dementia, of living at home, and they've got next to no financial assistance. We're in the middle of a financial crisis where people are struggling to get day-to-day things. They're struggling. Like Margaret's got double incontinence. That means we have to wash twice and 3 times a day. The bedding's wet. Our clothes are wet. The electricity bill, the energy bills, they're shooting up. It costs more for that. We can't particularly go anywhere in the car, but if we do, that's costing us more. So it's costing at every single aspect of the financial crisis at the moment. It's time for the government to step in and say, look, we recognise the fact that we're saving the health service millions of pounds.
As well as the financial burden of being an unpaid carer, Derek has also had to bear the emotional toll of Margaret's condition.
It won't get better. There's only one way she's going, and that's the same as everybody else with dementia. It's a one-way ticket. There's no cure for dementia. I've lost Margaret mentally. I love her to bits. There's nothing on this planet I wouldn't do to look after her. I love her to bits. But it's hard when you say to somebody, you're saying that you love them, and they're looking at you as if they don't know who you are.
Now all Derek can do is hope that his petition is passed in Parliament. Anna Riley, GB News, Northallerton.
Well, we'll be talking the Conservative leadership race straight after a short break.
Hello, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. Heat will be the key feature of the weather this week. We're starting hot and sunny. Temperatures will drop a little through the middle of the week, but the potential for those temperatures to build once more through next weekend. High pressure has been building in for some time. This weather front, though, is going to change things up a little bit, certainly across northern areas over the next 24 hours. For today, though, most places seeing plenty of blue sky. The sunshine may turn a little hazy at times as some high cloud spills in, and that cloud will be thickening across western parts of Scotland during the day. But for most, as I said, it's all about plenty of sunshine and the temperatures. 25, 26 across eastern Scotland, 24 likely in the east of Northern Ireland, but for much of England and Wales, mid to high 20s. 33 is likely somewhere across parts of eastern England. It's going to be a very warm night, especially in eastern England, but we will start to see that weather front bringing cloud and rain to parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. So things changing here, slowly turning a little cooler, but for most it's still a very, very warm night, a difficult night for sleeping. Parts of eastern England may stay above 20 degrees Celsius. That's going to be really quite uncomfortable. On to the details for Tuesday, and a different day for central Scotland, Northern Ireland. Lots of cloud, even a little bit of rain around. That should tend to fizzle out, turning brighter across the far north. A bit more cloud compared to today for England and Wales, but again, another very warm day. Hot across parts of eastern England, 32 Celsius, likely to be the top temperature. But things cooling off a touch across northern Scotland and Northern Ireland. And a freshening breeze, bringing a few showers here during Tuesday evening. Otherwise, things staying fine as we head into Wednesday, but that cold front will be kicking away the heat for a time. So temperatures Wednesday and Thursday still pretty warm and fine in the sunshine. This weather front will bring some rain across the north, but the high builds back and the temperatures could rise again this weekend.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well.
I feel like I could take on the world.
Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
What should Conservative MPs be thinking about as they consider who they're backing to be our next Prime Minister? Well, joining me now from Westminster is the Conservative MP for South Leicestershire, Alberto Costa. Alberto, always a pleasure to see you. You serve on the Privileges Committee and the Standards Committee too. The mudslinging has already started as the candidates for our next Prime Minister are scrambling for supporters. What advice would you give your colleagues who want to be the next leader? How should they keep it clean?
Well, firstly, Gloria, it's always a pleasure to be on this brilliant programme, and what a glorious day it is. My advice to all the leadership candidates is, given the way that Boris Johnson has been compelled to resign, standards and integrity are at the very core of what each leadership candidate should be promising. Doesn't matter whether they're pledges on tax cuts, on the Northern Ireland Protocol, on how to deal with Ukraine and Putin. All of these are as nothing if they're not underpinned by good governance. And what I want to see each of the candidates state is, one, how they've already put good governance and standards at the heart of what they've already done. So evidence by example how you've placed standards at the heart of the decision-making process in the jobs that you've already done. But secondly, and equally as important, the restoration of good governance can only happen if we re-establish proper functioning British cabinet-style government. So what I want to see each of the leadership candidates do is pledge that when it comes to selecting the cabinet, they won't select the pals on their campaign teams, they'll select the very best candidates for cabinet. And that's important, Gloria, for two reasons. One, you want obviously the best person to run a government department. But the second reason, equally as important, is you need cabinet members around that table that can stand up to a Prime Minister wherever necessary and say no. That's what properly functioning collective cabinet government means. And so that's what I'm saying as a long-standing member of the Committee on Standards and Privileges. If you want to get good governance back in the system, those are the two things you need to do.
Have you decided who you're backing?
Well, I've offered to all the leadership candidates to have a chat with me as the longest-standing member of the Committee on Standards, and then confirm in public what I'm saying. Evidence how they've put standards at the heart of what they've already done, and pledge that they'll create a cabinet, if successful at becoming Prime Minister, a cabinet made up of the very best talent in the Conservative Party, and not just the people that were good with spreadsheets in their campaign teams.
Very interesting. Some people might say it's a pipe dream, but the objectives are noble ones. There's no doubt about that. Now, at the moment, I think it's about 8 Tory MPs that are needed to get a leadership candidate on the ballot paper. There's talk about increasing that number significantly. But doesn't that risk narrowing the debate? Don't you need the widest possible debate about the future of your party?
Well, it's not just about the future of the party. We're in governance, Gloria, so it's the future head of government, Prime Minister, that will lead the entire United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So it's essential that the Conservative Party, party in governance, party with a mandate to govern, selects the very best leader, someone of the utmost integrity that can demonstrate not just quality policies, but they will bring on board the very best people into ministerial positions. And frankly, I'm delighted that we've got so much talent in the Conservative Party. We've got a good slate of candidates. But as I say, I've not picked anyone yet. I'm waiting to have a chat with all of them so they can tell me how they've put standards already at the core of decision-making processes and jobs that they've already done.
Tax cuts, whether to tax cut or not, is already emerging as a strong theme. All the leadership candidates want to cut taxes, apart from Rishi Sunak, who says unfunded tax cuts are comforting fairy tales. Who's in the right place on this?
I think it's right that we see the candidates lay out their panoply of policies, but as I say, from my perspective, none of these policies mean anything if they're not underpinned by standards. Let's not forget that in November 1990, when Margaret Thatcher resigned, when Theresa May had to resign, and when David Cameron resigned, these were all on issues of policy. But Boris Johnson hasn't resigned because of a policy difference with parliamentary colleagues. He's resigned because of the perception, at the very least, of a lack of good governance. So my view is that good governance must be at the heart of all the policies that each of the leadership candidates will espouse, because without good governance you cannot restore trust in the British public to get the Conservative Party re-elected in a year or two, when once again we face the general election.
trust is so important to you and standards so crucial, as you say. Should he really be staying in office until the 5th of September, Boris Johnson?
Well, the British organs of state are strong and robust, and I have faith in them, and I would tell your viewers to have faith in them. Although there's no constitutional position known as a caretaker Prime Minister, in reality we're in effect in what's called purdah, whereby the Prime Minister cannot initiate new and unique costly policies. He's there to manage government until a new leader of the Conservative Party is found, and I predict that's going to be quite a short matter, and that person will then quickly become the Prime Minister of the entire UK. So I don't have too much of an issue with Boris Johnson remaining for a matter of days and weeks in this role as we choose the best candidate of the utmost integrity to be the next British Premier.
Alberto Costa, Conservative MP, always a pleasure to have you on the show. I hope to speak to you again soon. Thank you for your time today. Well, the outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been speaking publicly this morning for the first time since his resignation last week. Let's listen to some of what he had to say.
Well, I'm determined to get on and deliver the mandate that was given to us. But my job is really just to oversee the process for the next few weeks, and I'm sure that the outcome will be good. And we just need to get on. And as I said, I think before to you, the more we focus on the people, on the people who elect us, on their jobs, their hopes, what they can get out of investment in science and technology. The more we talk about the future that we're trying to build, the less we talk about politics at Westminster, the generally happier we will all be.
Prime Minister speaking a little earlier this morning. Joining us now is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, it is good to see you, as ever. It's a crowded field, isn't it, Darren?
It really is. We've got 11 candidates at the moment. We may well get to 12. Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, may well decide to throw her hat into the ring, mightn't she, Gloria? It is really fascinating, this, to a large degree. We've really not seen a field like this, I don't think, in modern times, of the length and the breadth and the depth of Conservative candidates who are standing. They've all been largely making the pitches over the last couple of days. A real dividing line is clearly on this issue of taxation. Many suggesting, including Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, overnight, that she will be prepared to cut taxes on day one. We've heard from Nadine Zahawi, the current Chancellor, saying that he'd be prepared to cut public spending quite significantly in order to achieve those tax cuts. But in the end, this process is really going to properly begin today, isn't it, to a large degree? And I say that because we're going to have that meeting of the 1922 committee at around 5 p.m. this evening. They're going to set out the rules for the next couple of weeks. We're likely to see the first round of voting on Wednesday of this week, then maybe a second round on Thursday, a third and fourth round next week to whittle it down to 2 candidates. The big question, as you were putting there to Alberto Costa, is at what level will the threshold be for people to actually manage to stay in the race? At the moment, it is only 8 MPs to get into the first round. That rule could change later on today. It could be upwards of 20, and that clearly would exclude quite a few of the candidates.
And it's not necessarily looking like a clean fight, is it, Darren?
No, it really is not, actually. We've already seen quite a lot of mudslinging, I should say, Gloria, from lots of the candidates. Other teams, I would suggest, in the last couple of days. Questions about taxation, about what may well have gone on in the past, skullduggery, questions about sexual impropriety as well. And that's before the race has even properly started. There are even questions about what Downing Street's role in all of this may well have been. Boris Johnson having denied the fact that he is prepared to get involved in trying to damage any of the leadership candidates. That question was asked of him this morning, though there have been lots of reports and rumours that Downing Street are on an agenda to try and stop the favourite Rishi Sunak from getting the job feeling that he's been quite treacherous in the way that he's treated Boris Johnson. This is a very brutal moment. It's a contact sport politics, isn't it? And it will be brutal for some of the candidates. There will be revelations to come out in the days and weeks to come that could be personally quite damaging for them. But at the same time, they've decided to put themselves forward for the top job, not just leader of the Conservative Party, we have to remember, but in the end, as we're hearing, whether it takes weeks or maybe a month or two, they will end up, whoever wins, becoming Prime Minister of the UK.
Busy but exciting times ahead. Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, thank you. Well, there's still controversy across the country surrounding the circumstances of Boris Johnson's dramatic resignation last week. Our reporter, Will Hollis, has been speaking to people in Lincolnshire.
When the weather gets warm, Brits head to one place. In Sutton-on-Sea, on Lincolnshire's coastline, the summer getaway is starting. But there's one question that can't be escaped, and that's who might become Britain's next Prime Minister.
I think we need somebody that keeps us in Brexit, rather than these anti-Brexit people getting in.
I would like to see Sunak in the job. I think he's very confident, make a good confident leader.
I don't think I trust anybody, to be honest.
Without the backbiting, without the infighting, let's just hear what each one stands for.
There's plenty with leadership in sight, like Jeremy Hunt, Suella Braverman, and the former Health Secretary Sajid Javid, who was one of the first to jump from Boris's sinking ship.
Actually, I watched his speech, his resignation speech, and I thought it was really good. And I thought from that, I liked him. Yeah, better than the others. And I seem to know more about him, I think, than the rest.
A mile down the beach in Mablethorpe, and there's still one name on many people's lips. The wound of Boris Johnson's removal remains raw for coastal Conservatives here. Their communities have enjoyed tens of millions in levelling up cash, and they felt that Boris Johnson was the way to rebuild Britain's softening seaside.
Well, I think it's been a bit of a sad week, really, for Boris, because he has done a good job. He got us through the pandemic, through Brexit, and now the Ukraine thing, so it has been a bit sad.
He was well liked round here, that we did do, a few mistakes, as you would say, with him, drinking and all the rest of it at the parties and wherever you say. But yeah, he'll be sadly missed.
It's not good, is it? It's thrown everything into turmoil again, hasn't it? Everybody's just starting to kind of worry about bills coming in and the economy, and all of a sudden this is happening as well. You don't need it, do you?
But Britain's problems now lie beyond Boris Johnson. By the end of summer, a new Prime Minister will lead the Tory party and the country, but the effect of Boris Johnson, for good or bad, won't easily wash away. Will Hollis for GB News in the East Midlands.
The Labour leader, Keir Starmer, has set out his party's vision for Britain, pledging to get the economy growing again. Let's take a look.
Today, I want to put my focus where it ought to be, where it will be every day between now and the next general election, on the future, on the sort of nation that Britain can be, and the sort of nation Labour wants it to be. Only Labour can reboot our economy and end the cost of living crisis. Only Labour can revitalise our public services and re-energise our communities. Only Labour can unite the country and clean up politics. These three tasks will define my government, because until we address them, we leave ourselves vulnerable to the shocks and crises we've endured this past long decade.
The Labour leader speaking earlier this morning. Joining me is the Labour MP for Kingston upon Hull West and Hessel, Emma Hardy. Emma, good to see you. It's going to be a difficult period for the Labour Party, isn't it, over the coming months, because all we're going to be glued to is a Conservative leadership contest, and then Britain will have a new Prime Minister. It's going to be a really challenging time to get your voice heard.
I think it's a great time for the Labour Party, actually, because let's be honest, at the moment some of the Conservative contenders are fighting like rats in a sack. So while they're getting on with that, we can get on with showing our vision for what the country should be like and what it really could be like. Because much as the Conservative Party contenders want to sort of have a fight about culture war issues and all of that, what people are telling me in Hull is they're desperately worried about the cost of living. They're desperately worried about how they're going to pay their energy bills in October, and the backlogs and the wait waiting lists are absolutely horrendous in the NHS at the moment. They're the things that people really want to talk about, and they're the things the Labour Party have the answers to.
Just briefly, before we get on to the debate that you led in Parliament last week, is the Labour Party still intent on putting a confidence vote to Parliament? I mean, why isn't that just a waste of time? He's only going to be in office for a matter of weeks.
Well, no, because if we look back on all those letters that those Conservative MPs want us to forget about that they wrote, all those 50 ministers who resigned, and in those letters talked about integrity, honesty, decency, all of the qualities which they said Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, was lacking, it seems a little bit odd, if we're being honest, that they're now falling back into line and supporting him in his government for however long it takes. And I kind of think, what's the point in having a Deputy Prime Minister if when the Prime Minister resigns, the Deputy Prime Minister doesn't step up? I mean, that's what would happen in normal organisations and businesses. I know I've talked about being a teacher before, which is what I did. If the head teacher was unavailable, the deputy head teacher took over. So what we think is, if Boris Johnson is not fit to rule, which we don't think he is, and 50 of his own ministers don't think he is either, then he needs to go, and go now. Let a deputy leader take place and take over until they've elected a new leader of the Conservatives and therefore a new Prime Minister. But obviously what we're also saying is that if we really want change in our country, then we need that general election, because we need that fresh start for Britain.
Tell us why you are campaigning for better gynaecological services. You led a debate in Parliament about that last week.
Yes, and thank you for covering this, Gloria, on GB News. I really appreciate it, because it's a condition in an area that just doesn't get the attention that it needs. I've been on your programme before talking about endometriosis, and gynaecological conditions are really anything related to sort of women's health and reproduction. And what women are saying to me is that we all know waiting lists have increased, and I think we all accept, because of COVID, waiting lists have increased in all areas, but they've disproportionately increased for women's health. So women who are waiting for treatment to do with anything to do with, their reproduction, their periods, their, hysterectomies, anything like that, they're waiting even longer than anybody else for any other conditions. And what I'm saying is that we need to look at whether there is this bias, because what women are telling me from all over the country is that when they go to the doctor and they say they're suffering terribly with pains, they're told, oh, get on with it, it's just women's problems, learn to live with it, and it's not taken as seriously as other conditions. So what I really want the government to do, when it can hopefully sort out whoever's going to be their next leader, is look at this women's health strategy. We've got one in Scotland. Labour in Wales are sorting theirs out for Wales. We need one for the UK to deal with all of these urgent issues, because too many women are suffering at the moment, and it's really horrific what's happening to them.
We've just got 1 minute left, Emma. Do you think the NHS is institutionally sexist? Big question, but short answer if you would.
Well, I think we do need to look at whether or not there is a gender bias when it comes to how women's health is treated, because women say on average it takes 7.5 years to be diagnosed with endometriosis. I mean, that's unacceptable and too long. So I think it is one of the things that we should be looking at. Generally, as a country, as a society, how seriously do we take matters of women's health? Because I think it needs to be taken more seriously because of the impact it has on their everyday lives and their health and well-being, and not just that, but their relationships as well and their careers.
Hardy, Labour MP, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you. Next, I'm going to be talking with Conservative MP for Gloucester, Richard Graham. That's my latest Real Me interview. He talks drink spiking, his near-death experience, and why he thinks politics is in a better state than when he was elected back in 2010. First, it's Rosie with your news updates.
Good afternoon, it's 12:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. Boris Johnson says he's determined to deliver the mandate he was elected on during his final weeks as Prime Minister. He made the comments after it was announced there are now 11 candidates in the running to replace him. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss is the latest senior cabinet minister to add her name to the list. Well, speaking in his first public appearance since he resigned as Conservative leader, the Prime Minister said throwing his weight behind one of the candidates could damage their chances.
The job of Prime Minister at this stage is to let the party decide, let them get on with it, and to continue delivering on the projects that we were elected to deliver.
Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer has announced Labour will focus on the next election on growing the economy. In a speech this morning, he said Britain's dealing with a crumbling economy and deserves better.
Britain deserves better than this. We need a fresh start. We're not going to get that from a Conservative Party infected with the chaos virus caught from Boris Johnson. This is what I will do for Britain. And I will do it with a plan to tackle the three biggest issues that we face: rebooting our economy and ending the cost of living crisis.
Today could be the hottest of the year so far in Britain. The Met Office has issued a heat health alert for parts of the UK as temperatures are predicted to hit 33 degrees this week. People are being asked to check on those vulnerable to extreme heat. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Shortly, we'll be back to the briefing with Gloria.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
My latest Real Me interview is with Richard Graham, the Conservative MP for Gloucester. Enjoy. Richard, we were just having a brief chat before we put the cameras on, and you said that in 1993 you'd had a near-death experience. Well, let's do that on camera. Tell me about it.
1993, I got roped into the first ever attempted crossing of the Taklamakan Desert, which is a huge rugby ball shaped thing in the middle of Xinjiang province in western China on the edge of Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. And this was basically a 600-kilometer walk across a desert that had never been completely crossed before, as far as anyone knows. And I got amoebic dysentery, which meant that I couldn't eat or actually really drink anything for some time. So I lost about 2 stone from a starting point of about sort of 8.5, quite fast. And because we were walking roughly 30, 35 kilometers a day, it was quite hard going. And I would have died, I think there's no doubt about that, if it hadn't been for some incredibly powerful antibiotics given to me by the one female on this expedition who was a former army medic. And actually it's her 60th birthday a couple of days ago, so she is the woman who saved my life.
So every day must be very precious after that.
Literally, I think of it as a bonus every day. Yeah.
Yeah, in 2010, you decide to go into Parliament.
Yes.
Haven't you had enough punishment in 1993?
So my younger brother said, is this a moment of madness or a sort of premature male menopause? And, I think moment of madness is part of it. But the other bit of it was trying to use a lifetime of living in different places and doing different things and seeing what I could bring to the city of Gloucester that would be helpful. And I felt by then, I thought Parliament and politicians on all sides was in pretty bad state. And I thought that it'd be good to have more people in there who'd done lots of other things for their first 50 years and could contribute that outside experience rather than being an insider.
If you thought it was in a bad state in 2010, how would you describe our politics today?
I think it's in a better state, curiously. There are lots of newer MPs. In 2010, there were still a lot of people who've been around a lot of time. Many of them were bruised or ousted because of the expenses scandal and so on. I think today's situation is much less about the general group of members of Parliament and perhaps more about specific issues. So I think it's a different environment.
Do you enjoy the chamber, the debates in the chamber, Prime Minister's question time?
Sometimes. I mean, as you will know so well, you have to sit there for a long time sometimes to get in your sixpence worth. But I think if you go in there with an open mind to listen to the flow of debate and know enough about the subject to be able to pick up on bits that maybe other people haven't raised rather than making the same point or a pre-written question, then I think hopefully you can contribute something to the tone of the debate. Actually, Jack Straw said to me when I came into Parliament, because I knew him from Foreign Office days, but he said to me, take time to find your tone. What do you want to be known as? The grumpy one, the angry one, the feisty one, the calm one? Or, it was good advice, actually.
And having spent so much of your life abroad, what has that taught you about our politics, our country, where our country might go, what it's getting right, what it needs to do better at?
So when I sort of effectively left England in 1979, beginning of 1980, to go and live abroad for the next 20 years, I think at that stage, the UK was still not very cosmopolitan. And I don't think it was a very tolerant place. I think there were huge gaps in sort of understanding of each other. And we still have those. In my constituency, we still have pockets of the city that are very cosmopolitan, a primary school with 50 different nationalities, and then a mile and a half away, a school that is all completely white and only UK citizens. So there are still places where the fear of the unknown, sometimes on both sides, but often for the people who feel that they've lived there for generations and generations and, quote, newcomers, unquote, are sort of changing the place. I think that is what lies behind a lot of what might be called casual racism, is the fear of the unknown. So one of the things that I always try to do is to make sure as far as possible I spend masses and masses of time with all the different ethnic minorities so that people can see there's nothing unusual about this. This is what we should all be doing. This is what integration is about, is actually having the fun of going to Jamaican Independence Day celebrations, actually going around the mosques and talking with the imams, whatever the different cultural things are, throw yourself in because you're always going to learn something new. And immigrants try harder as a general rule. They are the thrivers, the ones with aspiration and ambitions. And you want to have that actually because it acts as a spur to everyone else.
Do you think people, white working class people, might be offended, though, to hear that that they're not the strivers? Isn't everyone a striver?
Yeah, most people are, sure. But sometimes you need a new ingredient. It's rather like if you're having a family lunch or a family supper, sometimes the old sort of jokes and teasing and banter and criticism, sort of slightly dominates. If you throw an outsider into it, you sometimes get a much more interesting, wider discussion that goes on and people sort of slightly moderate their sort of behaviour to each other because there's an outsider in there. So you all make a bit more of an effort. And I think that's what can very often happen. It happens with our white working class, to use your term, rugby communities, when you get foreigners who come over and play. It happens when Poles stay and marry local girls, take one example, and so on. So places change, they adapt.
Interesting to discuss all your thoughts on integration and the benefits of integration and newness and getting different perspectives in communities. How do you feel about the culture wars?
Well, I don't really get involved in them because I actually don't think many people really wake up in the morning and think, today's an opportunity to have an argument with someone else about culture, a statue, a term, whatever it is. So I think the great thing is, as a general rule, to avoid them like the plague. But we have a statue, for example, in Gloucester, of the Emperor Nerva, a Roman emperor who created the colonia of Glevum, that is now the city of Gloucester. He was a slave trader. We put this statue up about 20 years ago. No one's calling it for it to come down. He was trading our slaves back in Rome. So a culture war about a statue and what it symbolizes and what people were doing a long, long, long time ago is as vigorous or as non-existent as people want to make it. And I personally don't think, as the sort of voice of Gloucester, there is any reason to go there. We have a history festival that I created in 2011 where we've covered all this sort of stuff with speakers like David Olusoga for years, a long, long time. Down the road in Bristol, the council spent 16 years arguing about what to put on the plaque of Colston. They couldn't agree, and people took things into their own hands. That is a failure of political leadership. It doesn't need to go there.
You are a campaigning MP, and the thing that you're campaigning on at the moment, and we've talked to you on the show about it, is spiking.
Yeah.
Why?
Because a constituent of mine came to me with her experience of it, and it wasn't just the shock of being spiked by injection on a dance floor in a club just down the road from Gloucester. It was what happened afterwards. It was when she went to the police, when she went to the NHS, the business that actually you need to, if you like, be tested very quickly, otherwise whatever the chemical involved disappears, so you haven't got any evidence. And that is part of the problem, that people aren't able to sue successfully. Plus, under current legislation, there are two things that are illegal. One is spiking someone for sexual motives, and the second one is the sort of the poison that goes in. Both of those are illegal, but there isn't a specific offence of spiking itself or the intent to spike. So from a police point of view, it's much harder to sort of go on to a dance floor if you're called in and say, right, you were spiking or you were trying to spike, we're going to look at the CCTV and we're going to prosecute. Much harder. So if you talk to students, there's no doubt that there is a lot of spiking that goes on. Some of it in the drinks, if you like, the traditional spiking, and then some of it on the body as well. And both of those, in my view, are unacceptable. It makes life much more frightening for young people, makes going out for a night out much less fun if you're worrying about this sort of thing. And I think the government should act, and I think the government will act, which is good news.
And the act would look like the act you want to see is what?
So the crucial thing is to have an offence of spiking or the intention to spike. So people who are carrying drugs, for example, that they're going to slip into drinks, or carrying a needle that they're going to use on a part of a body, that would be a criminal offence. And I think it would have quite a salutary effect on what goes on in nightlife.
Would you need to do random searches to make that work?
Possibly. And in a way, you could argue some of those should be happening anyway. You also need nightclubs who are going to carry testing kits so that you can get an immediate test. You need the police and the NHS to work more effectively so that people can go and get instant help. I suspect, a sort of police nurse would probably be the best place for it if you're reporting it. So there needs to be a whole patchwork of stuff around it to make it meaningful.
We're not going to talk about politics because this is not about politics. It's about everything's about politics, but it's about broader themes. So I just wanted to ask you, when a party, and they all go through this, when there's a febrile period, what is the psychological impact on MPs? How does it affect you? I'm not asking for your views on whether turmoil is correct or otherwise, but does it affect you psychologically?
I think it affects everyone in slightly different ways. I think everybody wants to be able to get up in the morning, go to their workplace with the feeling that you are doing something that is valuable, that is considered to be valuable, and that you are all trying your best to make a difference and do things that help your constituents. And if the mood music around all that, for whatever reason, is bad, and there are either individuals or organisations or parties that are perceived not to be really representing those values, then that's a harder backdrop against which to do your job. No doubt about that, whatever the profession is. You know, I've seen this with policemen after the business of Sarah Everard in London, doctors, you know, a long time ago after Dr. Shipman. You know, whenever there's a feeling that your profession has been tainted, that's uncomfortable for individuals working it. And you have to keep, I think, saying to yourself and your team, because this is very much a team effort, no MP is any better than the sum of all their office, as you will remember. You've got to keep saying to them, look, there are some things we can control, and the main thing that we can control is what we do and how we help others. What other people are doing, what the mood music out there is, what the gossip, the social media are saying, and so on. If we spend our whole time looking over our shoulders at everyone else, we're not going to be able to get on with doing the things we want to. So, you know, I run a sort of project list of about 30 things at any given time, and we just relentlessly focus on those, and then reacting to all the events, the casualties, the problems, the casework that constantly comes up. And if you can do those two things, as well as some national good causes, that's enough to keep most people's lives busy.
Final question. Politicians are increasingly subject to abuse and threats. Have you ever been subject to any that worried you?
I mean, it's going to sound a bit blasé because there are some real threats out there. You know, one of my apprentices started a year or two ago with opening the mail on her first day, and the first letter she opened was from a bloke who said, "You are an effing Muslim and I will effing blow you up," with a nice picture of a man putting a bomb through a window. And she said very politely to my office manager, "What should I do with this letter?"
Is she a Muslim?
No, she wasn't.
Right.
But there are Muslims who've worked in my office.
Right.
So, and of course the whole thing was utterly bizarre, and the man has got all sorts of mental health issues. So I think in life, you know, it depends what you've been through. I've had death threats before in different jobs in different countries. I've been in prison in various different countries for, you know, reasons that had nothing to do with me. And you just have to find your own level of comfort. If these things really throw you, and then politics is probably not going to be a happy experience.
I have to just come back on, you've been in prison?
Yeah, I got locked up in Libya in 1977. I was arrested in China in the early 90s. You know, this is what happens when you go traveling in remote places and you arrive on the 10th anniversary of Gaddafi's accession, and there's been an instruction to lock up any foreigner who's wandering around.
Were you there for pleasure or work?
I was in my gap year. I was travelling across the whole of North Africa, yeah.
And you how long were you in prison?
A day and a night.
How was that?
It was quite interesting, but, you know, I mean, I didn't sort of come out with a broken leg or anything more than a few bruises, so, you know, good experience, life experience.
It's very philosophical. Richard Graham, thank you.
Thanks.
Now, kinship carers are friends or relatives who step in to look after a child if a parent dies or unable to care for them, but they receive little in way of financial support. The Liberal Democrat MP for Twickenham, Munira Wilson, is proposing that these carers get financial help, and I'm delighted she joins me now. Munira, why is this a passion of yours?
Well, it's because of the stories of constituents who've come to me who were desperately needed more support. They've stepped up like thousands of relatives do up and down the country overnight when a relative died. For instance, one constituent, I'm calling her April to protect her confidentiality, but her sister died of bladder cancer at quite a young age, and she stepped in to look after her 5-year-old son. Another constituent who came to me early on in the pandemic about getting more support. She's looking after a grandchild who was being neglected by one of her children, and a toddler left foraging for food in bin bags. These heroes step in, often at short notice, often overnight, enabling children and young people to have a loving home with somebody that they know, they save the care system tens of thousands of pounds, and we know that children in kinship care generally have much better outcomes than those who go to be cared by somebody that they don't know.
How many children find themselves in a position like this? How many people are affected?
Well, it's hard to give you... sorry, Gloria, there's some emergency vehicles coming behind me, but if you can hear me, it's hard to give an exact number because the government doesn't count them very well at the moment, but we think based on the 2011 census, there's approximately around 160,000 children at any given time living with kinship carers.
And you have MPs from other parties backing your proposals, which is absolutely crucial if you're in an opposition party and doing this as a backbencher. What's the next step?
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that this will trigger more of a conversation with ministers. It is difficult, as you know, Gloria, for backbenchers' legislation to actually become law, but I know that ministers in the Department for Education are very supportive of the principle. The challenge will be getting Treasury support for these proposals, and I'll be working cross-party to bring that pressure to bear, both here in the House of Commons and also with colleagues in the House of Lords.
And you mentioned the Treasury. How expensive would this be?
Well, we know that if you provide allowances for kinship carers and a social worker for kinship carers, the cost is about half of what it is for a child going into care, so around £35,000, as opposed to double that for those who are in foster care. So that gives you an idea of, on an annual basis, how much it would cost to give kinship carers the same level of allowances that foster carers get, because the care system just costs an awful lot more. So it will pay for itself. And we know that children in kinship care go on to have fewer mental health issues, they hold down a job for longer, they're likely to have better educational outcomes. So it's a no-brainer, really. This will save the system. It'll provide immediate cost savings through the care system and longer-term cost savings in terms of education and health as well.
Liberal Democrat MP for Twickenham, Munira Wilson, thank you very much indeed for talking to us about your campaign. You have been watching and listening to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. I will be back tomorrow at noon. Now it is time for your weather. Alice Stewart up next with On the Money.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. Heat will be the key feature of the weather this week. We're starting hot and sunny. Temperatures will drop a little through the middle of the week, but the potential for those temperatures to build once more through next weekend. High pressure has been building in for some time. This weather front, though, is going to change things up a little bit, certainly across northern areas over the next 24 hours. For today, though, most places seeing plenty of blue sky. The sunshine may turn a little hazy at times as some high cloud spills in, and that cloud will be thickening across western parts of Scotland during the day. But for most, as I said, it's all about plenty of sunshine and the temperatures. 25, 26 across eastern Scotland, 24 likely in the east of Northern Ireland, but for much of England and Wales, mid to high 20s. 33 is likely somewhere across parts of eastern England. It's going to be a very warm night, especially in eastern England, but we will start to see that weather front bringing cloud and rain to parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. So things changing here, slowly turning a little cooler, but for most it's still a very, very warm night, a difficult night for sleeping. Parts of eastern England may stay above 20 degrees Celsius. That's going to be really quite uncomfortable. On to the details for Tuesday, and a different day for central Scotland, Northern Ireland. Lots of cloud, even a little bit of rain around. That should tend to fizzle out, turning brighter across the far north. A bit more cloud compared to today for England.